This is what I would call a StuG III. That's what most English speakers would call this. The StuG III was based on the Panzer III, so the hull is essentially a Panzer III. But instead of a turret, it's got a 75mm anti-tank gun mounted in what is sometimes called a casemate, a solid room for the crew on top there. So this doesn't pivot like a turret. If you want to make a big deviation, left and right, to see your enemy and shoot at him, you have to drive the entire vehicle in a neutral turn, one track going back, one track going forwards, and turn the whole tank that way.
Oh dear! I do wish I hadn't said that, because I knew perfectly well that the Churchill came out after the Panzer III and was itself a pioneer of the neutral turn. Yes, it would be good for this sort of assault gun to be able to do a neutral turn, but in fact in World War II most tanks could not do a neutral turn, and the Panzer III couldn't. Let's have a look at the Panzer III turning on the spot. You see? One track remains still while the other moves, so it cannot pirouette on the spot, which would be handy if you wanted to remain hidden in your little camouflaged den.
This vehicle is credited with the greatest number of kills, more than Tigers, more than Panthers, more than all those other vehicles that are more famous.
They clocked up so many kills largely because there were so many of them. 10,086 in fact were made, compared with about 6,000 Panthers, 1,347 Tigers, and of all the many variants of the Panzer IV added together, there were only 8,553.
The StuG III, lurking in some forest perhaps, waiting in ambush, knocked out more Allied vehicles than any other of the German Wehrmacht's Panzer might. I didn't put that very well, but never mind, I'm going to carry on. Now, what is this lumpy stuff on the front? It's a weird paste, one of the ingredients of which is polyvinyl acetate, which you might know as school glue or white glue. It's a paste which puts distance between the top surface and the metal. The reason you might want to do this is that if a Russian comes up with a magnetic mine and goes, ha-ha, and puts it on, lets go of it and runs away, it won't clamp onto the side and it'll just drop on the ground harmlessly. So this was against magnetic mines. You've got to remember that in order for these magnetic mines to be put in position, someone physically has to be standing right here. And you can see that they've put it on the front. So they were worried about people putting a magnetic mine here. Just think how brave you'd have to be to get here. I don't completely understand why they've put Zimmerit on the mudguard. I wouldn't have thought that that would really worry them too much. If the Russians are putting magnetic mines on your mudguards, then they're idiots, because that's not going to do a great deal, but never mind. They've put Zimmerit on the mudguard. Perhaps they gave someone some orders to put Zimmerit all over this tank and he just got carried away with the instructions. So why would you make one of these instead of a proper Panzer III? With a proper Panzer III, you'd have a turret. You wouldn't have to rotate the entire body of the tank every time. It'd be like a proper tank, you know, with a turret. Well, these are much cheaper, and it's easier to engineer something that can take the recoil of a powerful gun if you don't have to have a turret which has to be able to rotate. That's quite a complicated bit of machinery that has to withstand an awful lot of stress. This is much cheaper and easier. You can also make the vehicle slightly lower, which makes it easier to hide, and you don't have to have all sorts of things that turn with a turret, so you can mount them quite solidly in the casemate. And this casemate has been up-armoured. Not only has it been given Zimmerit, it's also been given concrete here. And you can just about see the edge of the plate that ran alongside the gun mantlet, and they've added, I would say, about that much concrete on the front here. They've also got logs on the side. These would be almost no use against armor-piercing shot, but against something like a Panzerfaust, a heat weapon, high-explosive anti-tank weapon, they might cause it, just like side skirts, to explode away from the side of the tank, and that could possibly keep you comparatively safe. This particular tank is Maija, which is a Finnish name because this particular tank was actually issued to the Finns. Don't forget that the Finns were for a while fighting with the Germans against the Russians. That was before they changed sides again. It's a complicated thing, politics.
This is an earlier version, the Mark D. It has the short-barreled, low-velocity gun, which was for firing high-explosive shells in infantry support. Later, when they up-gunned StuG IIIs to the longer-barreled 75s, the removed guns were mounted on Hanomag 251 half-tracks, creating the 251/9 variant, the Stummel, or stump gun. A headlamp peering through a little slit there. My word, that's a hinge and a half, isn't it? There you can see the glass block in the driver's vision port, and above it those two tiny peepholes were for the gunner to look through. They later got rid of those and added the gunner's periscope up top. Exhaust at the back. One advantage of having no turret is that you can pile gubbins high on the rear deck. This later variant of the StuG has steel side skirts held away from the sides, as you can see here. The skirts are substantial slabs of metal which must weigh quite a bit. They were introduced to deal with anti-tank rifles which the Russians had in large numbers, and later they proved good too against shaped charged weapons like Piats and bazookas. Let's have a look inside. There's the driver's position. The Germans were so short of paint by the end of the war that they didn't paint the lower half of the insides white, instead leaving them the colour of the dark red metal primer coat. 3 of the 4 crewmen sat on the left, the driver low at the front, the gunner behind him on that seat that swung out from in front of the commander, who was at the back under his cupola. The gunner's sight here is alas missing, but it poked up through that hole in the roof. The loader sat on the vehicle's right, the other side of that big recoil guard which stopped the gunner and commander from being in the wrong place when the breech block lurched back after firing. The guard here has holes in it from a strafing by a Russian aircraft. Interesting to see how much daylight comes in through the front mantlet. The vision block could be swung open and the outer armoured cowl could cover it over. In the cupola, lots of fixed periscopes, each of which shows a tiny 2D picture of the world outside. There is also a mounting here for a donkey ear binocular. I think I would have called that a scissor scope, Scherenfernrohr, which I suspect is the same thing. More bullet hits coming down from above and hitting the machine gunner's shield on the top right of the vehicle. When the loader opened his hatch, he also pushed the gun shield up and forwards, and then the hatch acted as a prop for the shield, which is a good 2/5 of an inch thick and is flipping heavy. So there you go, the Sturmgeschütz III. Please be forgiving of this model. I made it when I was 11.
Lindybeige!